Is in exile on the island of Patmos, and then he has a vision from Jesus, and Jesus tells him to send this message to 7 churches which are in Asia Minor, so modern-day Turkey, which was really the center of Christianity at that time. And over the next few weeks, we're going to be looking at some of these letters to see what Jesus might be saying to us, because Jesus had a specific message for each of those churches. Some of the churches were doing really well, some of them were doing really badly, and some of them were in the middle. And I suppose that's true of churches today. Sometimes things are going well, sometimes things are going badly, and sometimes things are a bit in the middle. But just as Jesus had a specific message for each of these churches, Jesus has a specific message for us today. And so at the beginning of 2026, we're going to be listening to the voice of Jesus to see what he has to say to us as a church, but also to each of us individually. What is it that Jesus is saying to us today? And so let's look at Revelation chapter 3 and verse 7. This is the letter to the church in Philadelphia. To the angel of the church in Philadelphia, write. Let's just stop there. To the angel of the church of Philadelphia. Did you know that each church has an angel? And so we have an angel. And this is much more important than having a pastor. We have an angel. And sometimes in my mind's eye, I can see this angel. And the angel stands just outside the gates at the front of the church, and is about 100 foot high, sword drawn, shield up, protecting and looking after this church. And that is something I find a great comfort. To the angel of the church in Philadelphia, write this. These are the words of him who is holy and true, who holds the key of David. What he opens, no one can shut, and what he shuts, no one can open. I know your deeds. See, I have placed before you an open door that no one can shut. I know that you have little strength, yet you have kept my word and have not denied my name. I will make those who are of the synagogue of Satan, who claim to be Jews though they are not, but are liars, I will make them come and fall down at your feet and acknowledge that I have loved you. Since you have kept my command to endure patiently, I will also keep you from the hour of trial that is going to come on the whole world to test the inhabitants of the earth. I am coming soon. Hold on to what you have, so that no one will take your crown. The one who is victorious, I will make a pillar in the temple of my God. Never again will they leave it. I will write on them the name of my God and the name of the city of my God, the New Jerusalem, which is coming down out of heaven for my God. And I will also write on them my new name. Whoever has ears, let them hear what the Spirit says to the churches. I have placed before you an open door. And so at the beginning of 2026, I've been thinking quite a lot about open doors, opportunities. What Jesus is saying to this church is that actually what is ahead of you is a lot of opportunities. And actually when I've been thinking about opportunities and open doors, I've also been thinking about open goals. And these are just some examples of some open goals which people did not take advantage of. So let's just watch these now. That's one. That's another one. And then the third one's the most extraordinary one, because the ball's about to go in, and then he clears it off the line. So those are 3 examples of open goals or opportunities not taken. And what Jesus says to this church in Philadelphia is that what is before you is an open goal, an open pathway. But with opportunities also comes opposition. And so in the year ahead, there are certain guarantees that we have. One is that there will be opportunities. The other is that there will be lots of difficulties. There will be lots of challenges. There will be lots of things that will be difficult. And how do we navigate these times? How do we navigate the opportunities and the opposition, the opportunities and the difficulties that are to come? Well, the first thing, four ways to navigate 2026 and the opportunities and the problems that will emerge. The first is to adopt the right posture. The letter ends, as each of these letters ends, by saying, "Whoever has ears, let them hear what the Spirit says to the churches." The right posture to start the year ahead is the posture of prayer, is the posture of listening, and listening carefully, because God is a God who speaks, and therefore one of the most important qualities of the Christian is to be a good listener. Because actually it's about a relationship. Christianity is about a relationship with God. And as with all relationships, it's vital that we become good listeners. And so we are going to start the year by listening. In January 2026 is going to be is a quiet month for us as a church. And that is a wonderful opportunity for us all to be listening to the voice of God. And we listen through a number of different ways, but the most important way that we listen is by reading the Bible. The Bible is the most read, the most borrowed, the most stolen, and the most smuggled book in the world. One copy is sold every second, and more people have lost their lives sharing the Bible than any other book. And if you have, what I would recommend all of us to have is to have a method of reading the Bible each day. And if you already have a good method of doing that, that is fantastic. Please carry on. If you don't, please do either talk to me or to someone about finding a good method. And I could share what I do and what I find helpful. But there are lots of different ways of reading the Bible. But the most important thing is that we find a way that at the beginning of 2026, we are listening carefully to Jesus. Back in 2018, one of the pastors here was called Alex Koukouris. And he was praying in this church, in this building. And as he was praying in 2018, this thought kept on coming to his mind. He was praying about the future of this church. And he remembered that he'd spoken to someone in Brighton in 2016 at the back of church, who had told him that his wife had always sensed a calling to Brazil. And so Alex Koukouris, as he was listening to God, decided to send an email to me and to Tara, who were living in Brighton at the time, to ask us whether we thought maybe Christchurch Rio could be part of our future. And that email changed our lives. But it started through someone deciding that they were going to listen to Jesus. So that's the posture. Adopt the right posture. Second of all, know the true pastor. There is a clear leader of this church in Philadelphia. And the leader of this church in Philadelphia is Jesus. Do you know there are three things that are often important to churches nowadays, but which don't really appear in the Bible very much? And they are buildings, because the earliest churches didn't have buildings for the first 300 years. They are church services, which again, the New Testament doesn't talk about very much. And pastors, or the leaders of the church, which again, the New Testament doesn't talk about very much at all. In fact, it mentions all these 7 churches. They never once mention who the pastor of these churches are. Because Jesus is the pastor of each church. He is the true pastor. He is the true leader. And he is the one who gives us confidence. And Jesus is the great leader, the great shepherd. And it describes him here in three ways. One, that he's holy. And that means that the way that Jesus operates is not the way that we operate. His thoughts are above our thoughts. His ways of doing things are not the ways that we would do things. And his holiness, his being distinct from us, affects everything. And so his love is holy because he loves us in a way that's far beyond any human love. His wisdom is holy because his understanding and knowledge is far beyond anything that we understand or think is wise. And his power is holy because the way Jesus uses his power is totally different from the way that we use power. And so he's holy. It says that he is true. That means he's the source of all knowledge, the source of the right perspective. I don't know whether any of you feel that sometimes it's difficult to know which voices to trust, particularly when big news events happen. And so yesterday, as I woke up and we heard the news about Venezuela and the president being captured and taken to the United States, what I'm thinking is, is this a good thing or is this a bad thing? And then you hear all these different voices, and some people saying this is a good thing, some people saying this is a terrible thing. And I don't know whether any of you, like me, feel like, what do I trust? Who do I trust? What are the correct voices here? But what this is saying is there is a trustworthy voice. And Jesus is the one who is true. He's the source of all wisdom. But also it means that he is faithful. And people may have let you down in 2025. People may continue to let you down in 2026. But there is one who will never let you down, who is totally true and is totally faithful. And it says here that he has the keys of David. And what he opens, no one can shut. And what he shuts, no one can open. And when I arrived here and started my role, I was given one key as part of my role. And it was the key to the office here. And so as a pastor, I was given the privilege of one key. But Jesus, as the great pastor, has access to all keys. There is no door that he cannot open. He has access to all doors. And that means that he can always make a way, and can make a way through any obstacle. He could open up the Red Sea and lead the Israelites through it. He could lead the people through the desert. He could break open prison walls for the first disciples. And Jesus is the one who holds all keys and who can make a way. Back in 2019, when Tara and I were living in Brighton, we had this thought about whether it would be possible to go to Hong Kong to work with a woman called Jackie Pullinger and her organization, St. Stephen's Society. And I'd gone as a teenager when I'd 19 and had this life-changing experience. And we wondered whether we could possibly go as a family, and maybe we could go for 3 months. But as we thought about it, it seemed totally impossible, because I wouldn't be able to get 3 months off work. We would have to take our children out of their schools, and we thought that they wouldn't be able to keep places open for our children when we returned. St. Stephen's Society, where we wanted to go, we knew only took people for a minimum of 2 years, and we wanted to go for 3 months. And we didn't have any of the money to fly there or to pay for it. But what we thought we'd do is just try and see whether it would work. And bit by bit, the doors just seemed to open. We got permission from work, and we got permission from St. Stephen's Society, and permission from the school, and then someone sent us some money for the flights, and suddenly it was possible. And so at the beginning of 2020, we thought we were going to Hong Kong. And then, I don't know whether you remember it, but then there was this virus, COVID, that started hitting the world. And all doors everywhere seemed to shut, and flights were being cancelled. And of course, Hong Kong was very close to China, which was the center of everything that was happening. But even though all the flights out of Hong Kong seemed to be getting closed. Our flight into Hong Kong remained open despite all other flights being closed. And so what we realized is that we didn't actually know whether we would make it out of Hong Kong, but that way into Hong Kong, that doorway remained open. And so we were able to go in February 2020, and it changed our lives. Because Jesus has the keys, and what he opens, no one can close. But also, what he closes, no one can open. And 4 years ago, God opened a door for us to come to Brazil, to Rio, to Christchurch, Rio. But now it feels like God is closing a door for us. And what he closes, no one can open. And we don't quite understand why this is. And we're praying it's not a permanent closure. But he opens doors and he closes them. And other people close windows to stop us all getting wet in the heavy rain. So, adopt the right posture, which is the posture of listening. Second of all, know the true pastor. Thirdly, is follow the victorious pathway. What happens in this letter is that Jesus addresses this church and tells them all the things that they're doing well and encourages them to hold on and to be victorious. He reminds them that they are known. I know your deeds. Jesus knows us better than we know ourselves. No one understands us like Jesus does. He reminds them that they are weak. He says, you have little power. And actually knowing that we are weak is one of the most important ways to start a new year. He says that they are loved. Knowing that we are loved by God is, again, one of the most important things we can ever know. And I'll be talking about that a bit more in a few weeks. But then he says, hold on, endure, be victorious. In other words, do not give up, do not compromise. And one of the challenges that they have is what he calls the synagogue of Satan. It's quite a strong language. And those who claim to be Jews but are not. But what he's talking about is people who are providing a challenge for the church because for them, their nationality is more important than their relationship with Jesus. And that is one of the challenges that I think is for every church and the church around the world, particularly at the moment. It's fine to be patriotic. Actually, it's important to love your country and to serve your country. But when your country becomes more important than Jesus, then things go wrong. And so our spirituality is more important than our nationality. And what Jesus is saying to this church is, hold on to Jesus. Don't let go. Hold fast. And do not compromise. Do not let go. It reminds me of one of my favorite parts of Lord of the Rings, when there's that moment in Lord of the Rings when Gondor, the city of men, is being invaded by Sauron and by all the orcs, and they break through the front gate. And it says that everyone flees. And the Lord of the Nazgul, who's leading the army, rides in through the gates. And it says this in the Lord of the Rings. In rode the Lord of the Nazgul, a great black shape against the fires beyond. He loomed up, grown to a vast menace of despair. In rode the Lord of the Nazgul, under the archway that no enemy ever yet had passed, and all fled before his face, all save one. There, waiting silent and still in the space before the gate, sat Gandalf upon Shadowfax. Shadowfax, who alone among the free horses of the earth endured the terror, unmoving, steadfast as a graven image in Rath Dinnen. "You cannot enter here," said Gandalf, and the huge shadow halted. "Go back to the abyss prepared for you. Go back. Fall into the nothingness that awaits you and your master. Go." So that's how we're supposed to act, I think, which is standing strong, holding on to Jesus through all the challenges. And Jesus says to this church that then you'll be victorious. But the method of victory is different from the way we often conceive of victory. Because the victorious one throughout the book of the Revelation is the lamb that was slain, the lamb that was covered in blood, the lamb who'd been crucified. And so the pathway for us of victory is not by avoiding defeat, but by going through defeat. And so the Christian life looks, I think, a bit like this. So you become a Christian, and actually what you're filled with joy and peace, and you're loved by God, and you have this deep security that comes from knowing that you're loved with a perfect, everlasting love. And then something goes wrong, and we begin to go down. You get ill, or there's a disappointment, or you feel let down by someone, and you go down into the depths. But then from that emerges something far, far more beautiful. And so that is the shape of the Christian life. So if you think about something like Psalm 23, "The Lord is my shepherd, I lack nothing. I walk beside still waters. He restores my soul. And then even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil." But then it ends with being in the house of the Lord. If you think about how any healthy relationship works, you form a friendship or a romantic relationship, and you grow closer, and it builds you up, and it's exciting, and then suddenly you realize that there's something you need to confess, or something you need to say sorry for, or something you need to forgive. And you've got to go through the valley in order to get through to the other side. And the constant temptation of the Christian life is to try to jump from here to there. Let's just see if we can avoid that bit. And there's actually a moment in the Gospels where Jesus is telling his disciples, what's going to happen is I'm going to be arrested, I'm going to be crucified, but then I'll be raised on the third day. And Peter says, no, you don't have to do that. Peter says, no, Lord, that's not going to happen. You can do this. And Jesus says to Peter, get behind me, Satan. I have to do this. This is the pathway that I have to adopt. And so this is the pattern then of the Christian life and the victorious Christian life, is we always have to go through the valley. And so there are times when we're facing difficult things. And so just before Christmas, we got... I'll try not to catch Tara's eye. We got news that my grandmother wasn't very well. And she was 97. And what happened over the next few days is she got worse, and she got worse. And then on the 19th of December, she passed away. But now she's with Jesus, on the other side of death. And so this is the pathway for all of us. And sometimes we go through sickness. Sometimes we find that we have to leave countries that we love and don't want to leave. But we trust that there is victory the other side, the victorious pathway. And finally, and very quickly, we hold on to the beautiful promises. And Jesus makes two very beautiful promises here in this letter. He says, first of all, that you'll become like pillars in the house of God. And Philadelphia was a city that was renowned for suffering lots of earthquakes. And when there were earthquakes, the things that would be left standing after an earthquake would be the pillars in the temples. And what Jesus is saying is not that there won't be earthquakes coming up, but when everything is shaken, you will still be standing. And so this is the promise for us, that if we hold on to Jesus, even when life shakes us and things are uncertain and difficult around us, we will be able to stand strong and remain standing at the end of it. And then the second promise is that it says that I will give you a new name. The name, I will write on them the name of my God. And again, Philadelphia was a city that kept on being renamed. So it was originally called Philadelphia, and then under Tiberius, it was called Neo-Caesarea, because after Tiberius Caesar. And then when the Flavian dynasty of Roman emperors took over, it was known as Flavian, because I think the emperors, like many people, like naming things after themselves. But Jesus was saying, actually, the one who will name you is not the emperor. I will name you. And as in a few weeks' time, children will be going back to school. And one of the things that we'll be trying to do is to make sure that the children's names are written on the things that they possess. Because when they go into school, if they lose something, the key question is, did you have your name on it? And if they had their name on it, we think you'll probably find that thing again. And if you don't, then it will probably be lost. And it's the same with us. Jesus has put his name on each of us. And that means that maybe there'll sometimes where it feels like we're getting a bit lost. Sometimes it will feel like we're wandering off. But Jesus has put his name upon you. And that means he will find you and bring you back home. So these are the things for us over 2026. That we might adopt a posture of listening to the voice of Jesus. That we might know the true pastor, Jesus Christ, who is holy and true and who holds the keys of the kingdom. That we would adopt the victorious pathway as ones who are known and loved and victorious. And we would hold on to the beautiful promises of Jesus to be pillars and to be named by Jesus. And he says that we'll be pillars in the temple of God, which means that we'll live in the presence of God forever. And actually that is the great thing that is reassuring. Because pastors come and go, and countries come and go, and presidents come and go, and jobs come and go, and lots of things change around us. But the one thing that we know and we can hold on to is that Jesus will promise never to leave us. We can always live in his presence. For he will never leave us and he will never forsake us. And that is the thing that's most reassuring as we head into 2026. Shall we pray? Let's stand and let's pray. So if you're able to, why don't we stand, and we're going to ask God to come by his Holy Spirit and to fill us and to encourage us. So let's pray.